Murdoch. I'm gonna go ahead and say I didn't care for this book. I don't think it was because it was poorly written, because a lot of the reviews that I've seen are very favorable. I think it was definitely a personal matter where I didn't connect. I didn't really care for the writing style. I didn't care for the character development. I thought the plot development was really slow. So it wasn't a book for me. But by the end, I did find that I cared about the main character and that there were many elements that I thought were done well. Given that, I would say try it. See what you think. But it's not something that I would invest in. I don't even know how I came across this book. I think it was just one that was on my TBR, like on my library holds list, and I was like, all right, I'm finally gonna check it out and actually read it, or in my case, listen to it. But, and that is where my first problem comes in, is that I felt like Murdoch dropped me into the middle of something, and I was like, excuse me? Like, what's going on here? Like, I don't understand what's happening. I felt like I missed out on so much. And it took, oh my gosh, how long did it take? I want to say maybe halfway through the book until I really learned what was going on. Before I go further, I will tell you, the plot revolves around this girl named Carrie and her younger sister Janessa, who have been living in the woods for X number of years. They had been living with their meth head mother, who eventually disappears, writes a note to, I guess, Children's Services, and is like, look, I kidnapped my kid. This is who her biological father is. Here's where they are. Go get them, you know? And so then her dad comes and gets her, and she has to kind of acclimate to proper society. So I had no clue about any of this. Like, so going back to the fact that I have no idea how I got my hands on this book, I honestly don't even, I obviously did not do my research beforehand. Because sometimes you get the gist of it right away. I had no clue. Obviously, it was like the first chapter where the dad comes and gets her. So you do understand that this is not a good person in her life. This is not someone who belongs in her life. But you have no idea how old she is, how long she's been in the woods, why she's been in the woods, why her mother has abandoned her. Like, you don't know any of this. All you know is that she's hanging out with her sister, and all of a sudden people show up who aren't supposed to be there. And then you get the sense that this guy is her dad. And she's not pleased about this. And then we go through kind of the court proceedings of him having full custody of both of them and this and that and the other. And then she has to go from being this backwoods person to someone who can survive amongst the sharks, you know? It took me half of the book to connect with her. It took me half of the book to care. It took me half of the book to understand. And that is just too long. Like, for me, honestly, for anybody, like, you need to connect within the first couple chapters. Preferably the first chapter. When a writer queries a book, like, you get 25 pages. You get 5 chapters to convince an agent to say yes. So I would love to know what made her agent say yes. Or what made all these other people give such favorable reviews. I can sort of see it, because by the end, there were a lot of things I thought Murdoch did well. I had connected, I had formed good opinions, I was kind of sad to see it over, but I think if the book had provided more development early on, I would have been a lot more favorable. As I said, you're basically dropped into the woods with her. And you have no idea who she is. You don't even know how old she is. I thought she was maybe 12, but then her voice made her sound like she was maybe 17. And so I was like, who is she? So what kind of authority figure is she? What kind of authority, period, is she? Why should I care what she has to say? Why should I care what she's been through? That kind of leads into her mother, who we never get to see. We only see her in flashbacks, but we do understand she wasn't a good mother. She was a meth head who, in order to feed her habit, pimped out her daughter. She would abandon both daughters. She had Janessa because she was trying to score a fix. So obviously she slept with a man, she ended up getting pregnant. And then Carrie raised Janessa. You don't get to see much of the mother, but you do understand she's not that great of a person. And obviously, by this point in the novel, she's abandoned both of her daughters. But Carrie has this attachment to her, which on one hand, I get it. That's her mother. Her mother who has fed her these lies about her father so that Carrie thinks that the mom is the good guy. But then throughout the novel, you see the things that the mother put Carrie through, and Carrie is obviously against it. Like, even at a young age, Carrie realizes what her mother's doing to her is not appropriate, is not right, is not comfortable. Yet, Carrie is still so attached to her mother and thinks that her mother is right about everything when the father has proved the contrary about everything. And so I was just like, who are you, Carrie? And why do you think the way you think? Why do you feel the way you feel? I do understand her attachment to the woods because, as her social worker says, just because it's a bad situation doesn't mean that somebody will not make something good out of it. So Carrie had made the woods and this isolation her home. She had found a safe place within an unsafe world. I'm okay with her preferring the woods to the comfort of a shower and a bed and clothes. You know, all these things that we take for granted. And we would say, hello, why aren't you happy? So I can see that, but I do not see this unnatural attachment to a mother who, in my opinion, never gave any indication that she cared. Maybe that's an exaggeration. There were certain things she did, like she did bring school books, like secondhand books. She did teach Carrie how to play the violin. There were little things, but in the grand scope, I don't know. I guess it's because I've never had a parent who is that neglectful, so I don't know how somebody who sees the truth of a situation can still be like, well, my mother's a saint. You know, I mean, not that she actually thought her mother was a saint, but she just thought her mother was the end-all be-all. Let's get into the book. As I already said, it starts out with Carrie and Janessa being found in the woods by Carrie's biological father and their social worker. They're brought back to the city, which I guess that just depends on your definition of a city. Her father gets legal custody of both of them. He brings her home to his new wife and his stepdaughter Delaney, who is a little bit older than Carrie. And then Carrie has to kind of relearn what life is. One thing I loved, although I wish it had come a little sooner, was how loving her father was, and her stepmother, Melissa, how she was not the evil stepmother. I'm assuming she and the dad had been married for quite some time because Delaney considers him her father. She's gone through many years of this process, of this ordeal of looking for Carrie. So when Carrie finally shows up, Melissa is excited about it. She welcomes the girls in with open arms. She gives them a lot of grace, a lot of mercy. She's very gentle with him. I thought Melissa was a great character because she's the opposite of most stepmothers. But I wish that, I don't remember Carrie's dad's name. It's only given a handful of times. I think it's Charles or George or something. Anyways, it's not until the very end, honestly, that we get a flat out conversation between Carrie and him about what happened to her, about why he never came looking for her, about what the truth behind the situation was. Before that, I think maybe we had one other overheard conversation between himself and Melissa about having the girls at their house, about making it a home for Carrie and Janessa, about being patient with them in learning how to acclimate to everything. I really enjoyed the parents. I just wish those subjects had been handled sooner. However, that reminds me, this entire book, I thought was a little too condensed. I don't know how thick it actually is, but this is something that I did see in other people's reviews, is that everything happened a little too quickly. Like, Janessa, who is mute, or selective mutism, she accepts this new situation, these new people right away. And even Carrie, even though she's a bit more standoffish throughout the entire novel, and yes, she does miss her mother, she does miss her old life, she's really accepting of all of it, despite the fact that she's had barely any time at all to accept it. I mean, I want to say they're found maybe at the end of November or maybe mid-November, and then she starts school the beginning of December, and then I think maybe there's another month. So this book takes place over 3 months, and already, like, this is their normal life, that they're okay with it. I thought, as traumatized as Carrie in particular was by her upbringing, by the lies her mother had told her about her father, I thought she was way too okay with everything far too fast. We didn't get any scenes with her meeting with a psychologist. Janessa never went to a psychologist, a social worker. Like their social worker was there at the beginning. There were a couple of mentions of her. They saw her to get like a grade placement, and that was it. There was no other outside involvement in their acclimation to this new life. So even though I wish we'd gotten those conversations sooner, which in my opinion would have been natural, like, wouldn't both parties have been desperate to know the truth? I also wonder at the organicness of that. Like, in these certain situations, you do need to leave some time for things to settle down before you jump into things that might make people want to run away. She is at the house, which is, it's basically like an upper middle class family, and she eventually starts school, and as I said, her mother had bought them school books, and Carrie had taught both of herself and Janessa all the basics, or just whatever she could get her hands on. And so Janessa and Carrie both test 2 grades above their age level, which at this point is when we learn that Carrie's not 15, she is 14. And what I do not understand is her reaction to this fact. Maybe it's supposed to go along with being overwhelmed as a whole, but when she learns that she's actually a year younger than she's been thinking she is, Carrie loses it. It's like her whole world crumbled down. Not the fact that her mother abandoned her, not the fact that now she's thrust into a life with a man that she's grown up distrusting, but that she's 14 instead of 15. I did not understand that at all. It's your age. She tested above her grade level, so it's not holding her back in school. It's not holding her back in anything, except that she is not as old as she thought she was. Before I get into what testing above her grade level or her age level means, I want to talk about Delaney. On a whole, I like Delaney. I thought all of her reactions were completely plausible, but in the beginning, I was super confused by her, because when she first meets Carrie and Janessa, she's incredibly sullen. She doesn't want to have anything to do with them. But then, literally that night, so after she rejects them, she kind of comes by Carrie's room, and she's being mean to her about the fact that Carrie's letting Janessa stay in her room rather than the room that was set up for Janessa. But then she's like, so let me help you. Let me be nice to you. And I'm like, pardonnez-moi? What? I don't get this 180. And then, for the rest of the book, until she and Carrie come to blows about something, she's awful to her, which I don't mind that. Like, I completely get it, because she has grown up in the shadow of her father's missing child. So, of course, there's that natural rivalry, that natural feeling of being less than somebody else. And so I understand why she is not happy about Carrie showing up. I do kind of question her acceptance of Janessa, except for the fact that Janessa wasn't a factor. Nobody knew that Janessa existed. I guess maybe because she had no competition with Janessa, she was able to be like, all right, I like Janessa. But yeah, so I liked Delaney. I was really confused by her at first, and so that overshadowed how I felt about her until basically the end of the book, until things were explained and I'd gotten used to her. So Delaney is now like, no, I don't want Carrie in my grade because everybody is going to think she's weird and I don't want them to know that we're connected. Carrie had tested 2 grades above, but in order to help her acclimate socially, the social worker was like, we're just going to put you 1 grade above to create that tension in the book, which I'm okay with. We need that. So that is why she and Delaney are sharing classes. So Delaney is that stereotypical popular girl, which I'll accept. But what actually bothered me more is that Carrie turns out to be like supermodel beautiful, but she doesn't know it. This book, there were just so many things that made me roll my eyes. One, the narration, it's terrible. As I said, Carrie is 14. Yes, she has a much more mature voice, but she's 14. But then the narrator, I hate this about Southerners, where you can have this really terrible twang and super backwoods. Like, I don't like that stigma that's attached to us, especially because some people actually have it. No offense to you if you do. But, so this, not only does she make Carrie sound older because she's obviously an older person herself, but then she gives her this horrendous backwoods twang. Literally, you do not want to hear it. There are just so many cringe-worthy aspects for me about this novel. So even though in the end I liked it, this whole thing, Carrie being beautiful but not knowing it, come on now, like, I thought it was a little over the top. Like, did we have to put that in there? On her first day of school, because we're going along with cliches, she is approached by this really cute guy who just happens to be Delaney's crush. And then Delaney is like, stay away from him or I'm going to tell everybody the truth about you and your mother. Of course, he's like, oh, let me be all gallant and flirt with you and walk you to your first class and be your friend. When that does not happen in real life. Maybe because she's supermodel beautiful, and that's the kind of treatment that supermodel beautiful people get from strangers. But, like, come on, people. I mean, yes, eventually we get an explanation behind it, but until then, I just wanted to gouge my eyes out. Just wanted to say, Murdoch, really? Really? And then on top of that, she already has a boyfriend. You know, I mean, like, not only does he flirt with her, and he's nice to her, and he stands up for her, but he wants to be more. And this is only after, like, 3 weeks. And he's like, well, I thought we were more than friends. Anyways, she's going through school, and this, I thought, was kind of superfluous. I mentioned that her mother taught her the violin, so she's really good at the violin, which I'm okay with. But she brings the violin case to school, even though she never wants to play it. She doesn't want other people to know she can do it, and she hates carting it around. Yeah, eventually she equates it to a safety blanket, but I felt like it needed more purpose. A lot of this book needed more purpose, in my opinion, and I just didn't get it. She's going around school for however long. She has this she has this violin case, and then Delaney threatens her to stay away from Ryan, so now she has to stay away from Ryan. She does have one comrade who is a girl named Pixie, who I guess is 12, so they're outcasts together. Even Pixie, I just thought she was gonna be deeper than she was. She again, felt superfluous, where, she's the first person that Delaney feels comfortable with. She's the first person who makes Delaney feel like it's okay to be who she is, which I liked. But the more we get to know Pixie, the more surface level, the more superficial we find that she is. And that is completely contrary to Carrie. And so I was just like, really? I mean, okay, yes, Pixie is 12, but she's in sophomore level classes. So I can't imagine what my maturity rate would be if I were being exposed to much older people while I was younger. But I don't know, I guess I just expected more. But I expected more out of most characters in this book. I would say Melissa and Carrie's dad are the only two people that I didn't expect more from, that I thought Murdoch achieved what she needed to achieve with them. Even Janessa, because as I said, Janessa has select mutism. And going along with the fact that we were just dumped into a story, and it felt like we were dumped in the middle of the story, I kept wondering why. Because even Janessa, with her selective mutism, I know little about this subject. But what I do know is that selective mutism usually occurs because of some significant scarring event in one's life. But we did not learn what that was, or that there even was something, until far too late in the book. So I just kept wondering, is this necessary? Because for me, everything needs to have a point. I feel like for every writer and every reader, everything needs to have a point. Otherwise, why is it there? It doesn't even need to be some super metaphysical kind of deal. There needs to be a reason to have it in there. I just kept wondering why. Why do I care? Why does Janessa behave this way? What purpose is it serving? And then from there, Murdoch, I felt, kind of did a 180 with Janessa, where, and this goes to show how much I don't know about selective mutism, because I do not know what accompanying behavior is. But, so Janessa won't talk to anybody, but then, she does talk to Carrie a little bit, and Carrie kind of knows how to communicate with her without words, but aside from not talking, she is a completely normal 6-year-old. She is bouncy, and she is loving, and she's immediately accepting of everyone around her. She excels in her new class. Like, everybody in her class accepts her. And maybe when you're in kindergarten, there's no other way. But I was just like, I was having a really hard time reconciling these two parts of her personality. And I think, again, it goes back to this really short timeline, this time frame in which Murdoch is trying to get everything in there, when maybe she needed to have extended it. Spoiler, we learn that not only did Carrie's mother kind of sell herself for drugs, but she also allowed men to take advantage of Carrie. So basically, until Carrie started having her period, she was molested. It was never penetration. It was just, I guess, whatever else a man could do. But in order to prevent her mother from doing it or allowing it to happen to Janessa, Carrie let it happen to herself. The biggest spoiler of them all, which is the cause of Janessa's mutism and Carrie's deepest, darkest secret, is that one day they were in the woods, and this man approaches them, and he's like, your mom owes me money. Where is she? And Carrie's like, I have no idea. And so he ends up raping her. She wakes up before he is able to finish raping Janessa, and she kills him. And so she's like, I can't tell anybody about this because they're going to send me to jail. And then she blames herself for Janessa's mutism, because she's like, Janessa is keeping my secret. Which, on one level, I understand. But on the other level, I don't. Janessa figured out what happened, even though she was 5. But I don't know if I really buy this being the reason for her to stop talking. I mean, it's traumatic for her to see her sister being raped and then to almost being raped herself. So yes, if we had left it there, I'm good with it. But then to be like, well, she doesn't talk because I killed the man. I mean, I just wonder how much Janessa understood about that kind of thing, which leads me back to another point that I'm glad I remembered to talk about. I told you that Carrie is extremely intelligent, which is fine. Like, just because somebody does not have formal education, just because they don't grow up in high society or around, sophisticated people, does not mean they are not smart. But there are things that I'm like, how does Carrie not know this? Like, she knows what a Teletubby is because she remembered it from before her abduction. But she doesn't know what a pencil is. In all of those books that she read, she never heard of a pencil. There was never a drawing of a pencil. I mean, I don't know about you, but my math books would have those little informational square with a cartoon pencil. Like, she doesn't know what a pencil is, but she knows who Poe is. I barely know who Poe is. Like, there's all these things that she's like, I don't understand. Yet, I have the intelligence of an 11th grader, even though I'm in the 9th grade. I just thought it was disjointed. I mean, if she knows so much, if she can do trigonometry, I understand her not knowing slang. But there's so many vocabulary words that she was like, I don't really know what that means, but by his tone, I can infer. And her speech was incredibly, like, yes, it was backwoods country, but on the whole, it was very intelligent. So I was like, Carrie, I don't understand you at all. I think she's completely at odds with herself. That's the biggest spoiler, is that she was raped. She ends up killing a man. Side note, this man actually is Janessa's dad, which I don't really think it was important to know, but we know it. We learn that Ryan is the love interest. He's initially nice to her because they were friends when they were kids before she was abducted. Here's another thing that I was like, seriously, Carrie? He reveals to her, while she's being blackmailed by Delaney about her past, which I don't understand why she's freaking out so much about it. Because if it's as big of a deal as we're led to believe, wouldn't people know? Like, and it's not that her mother was a drug addict, that she had been raped, or that she had been molested growing up. It's the fact that she was kidnapped. Is that really something so sensitive? Not sensitive is the wrong word, but is that really something somebody would want to hide about themselves? I don't know. It's an honest question. She's being blackmailed by Delaney to keep all of this a secret. But then Ryan reveals that he knows who she is. His mother had a scrapbook. He had seen one of the clippings of an article, and he presents it to her, and she flips. Like, she just freaks out and runs away from him and ignores him for the rest of the week. Why was that a bad thing? I honestly do not, as I said, she's completely at odds with herself. I do not think much of her behavior makes sense. So Ryan was somebody that she was friends with beforehand, and I guess, I don't know, maybe it was so traumatic for him as well that it imprinted on him, but I think because his mother kept up with the story, that is why he remembered it so well. So this is why he was so nice to her when he first met her, because he knew who she was, because they had been friends, and he was just happy to have his friend back. And it didn't help that she was supermodel beautiful. Vogue it, right? Right? Like, if I vogue it, does that mean I'm the same way as Delaney? On a writing level, and I think this would not have been as big of a problem if I'd been reading the book, but for the audiobook, whenever we would have flashbacks, it was extremely jarring. For one, because both the present and the past took place in the present tense. And so I was just like, what happened? Where am I? What's going on here? And I love reading the present tense. I write in the present tense. The fact that it's all in the present tense doesn't bother me. It's the fact that the past is in the present. And without seeing maybe some kind of delineation on the page, or maybe the paragraphs are now italicized to let me know it's something different, I had no clue what was going on. And so while I did find that information valuable, and actually I preferred the flashbacks. I thought the most effective parts of this novel were seeing the abuse that Carrie endured, which sounds terrible, but it is what connected me to her. It is what made me see how she became who she became, where she got her strength from, showed me more than anything else the love she had for Janessa, but I hated going back to them because I felt like they interrupted the story because there was no clear delineation. So that is it. I know I made this book sound really unappealing, but in the end, I didn't mind it. I do not know how she got an agent or got published because I thought she could have done certain things better, but by the end, I did find that I wished I could have gotten more of Carrie. I could have gotten more of the story. I did enjoy where I ended up. I just didn't like getting there. If that makes any sense at all. I would not recommend reading or listening to the audiobook. It's an unenjoyable experience. And just know that you gotta go into this book with an open mind. You gotta go in knowing you're not gonna understand who characters are, why they do the things they do, or what's going on for a very long time. There we go. Tell me what you think. Have you read it? Tell me about any other books where you find you have this issue where you didn't like the book, but you did like the book. I'll see you later. Doodles!